I was told my presence would make it awkward at the beach wedding I'd quietly helped along for years. Rides to internships, groceries on my card, a summer deposit when rent ran short, so I smoothed my voice, measured my breath, and said I understood. Understanding, though, isn't surrender. It's the one calm minute where you count receipts, set clocks, and choose a tide that comes in exactly when people have their phones out, and the truth can travel faster than a bouquet toss. You're watching Revenge Files. Subscribe for a new twist daily. My name is Laura Myers, I'm 56, and I live in Wilmington, North Carolina, a town where the air tastes like salt and sunscreen, and where people pretend the ocean can rinse anything clean. I raised my son, Caleb, mostly alone after my husband died when Caleb was 13. I taught piano in the afternoons, answered phones at a dental office in the mornings, and took weekend gigs playing weddings just to keep our roof patched. If you ask me what a mother gives, I'll tell you a ledger of small transfers no one sees. Gas money that becomes a job, a casserole that becomes a grade, a sleepless night that becomes a diploma. He called on a Tuesday in May. "Mom, you know Serena doesn't like you. If you come, you'll make it awkward." I held the phone between shoulder and cheek and watched gulls tilt like paper kites over Banks Channel. I said, "I understand." Then I hung up and laid my hand on the paperback I'd been reading, palm heavy the way you rest on a piano when the last chord still shivers in the strings. But then, understanding collected into a plan. The first step was clearing the table and pulling a file box from the hall closet. Receipts, emails, texts, copies of checks, years of them. Some because I'm a saver, some because a woman who pays attention survives. There was the $1,850 tuition gap I covered sophomore spring. The $600 for a used suit and shoes when he got his first office job. A debit of $350 labeled Wrightsville Rentals. The deposit I put down for the tiny apartment he and Serena shared when they first moved back from Raleigh. None of it was a bill to my son. It was a record for me, a reminder that I had already been generous enough to be spoken to with respect. I made tea and decided not to ruin his wedding. That's the part people never believe when I tell this story. I wasn't going to storm the ceremony or hold a sign at the reception. My revenge was going to be proportionate and precise. It would be about ownership and boundaries, not destruction. Except, by 9 the next morning, my bank texted me about a $4,000 charge to my credit card from Carolina Dunes Pavilion, Caleb's venue. I froze the transaction. I called the bank. Then I called the pavilion. The event coordinator, a woman named Trish with a voice like polished glass, said, "We processed the sponsor deposit using the card on your authorization form, Ms. Myers." "What authorization form?" I asked. "The one your daughter-in-law sent us. You're the family sponsor on the account. We require a local member to sponsor any non-member event. You signed the form." She emailed the form. I printed it and held the paper like it might bite. My name was there in blue script, my name in a font I don't use, alongside my address and phone number. The signature had a loop I have never written in my life. Serena had scanned a page with my name typed under a signature line and pasted in a pretty imitation. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I opened a new folder on my laptop called Pavilion Fraud and saved everything. Then I drove to my bank on Oleander Drive with the paper in a clear sleeve and filed a dispute. I requested a new card. I asked for a printed, time-stamped letter stating the freeze. I filed a police report with the Wilmington PD for identity misuse. Not because I wanted Serena arrested, but because a case number is leverage when vendors start calling. I emailed Trish at the pavilion and copied the general manager and the board address listed on their website. I wrote that my signature was forged, that I did not authorize any sponsorship, and that their policy would require a legitimate sponsor or a double deposit by noon Friday. Trish called within an hour. "We'll remove your name immediately," she said tight, "but without a sponsor the contract adjusts. They'll need an additional $4,000 security deposit and proof of event insurance. Or we cancel." "That's your policy, not my punishment," I said. "Please put it in writing." One problem, Serena told people I was sabotaging the wedding. She left a voicemail only 10 seconds long. "We know what you did, and it's cruel." I saved it. Caleb texted, "Why are you doing this?" I typed back, "You used my card and my name without asking. Fix it." He waited a long time before replying, "I can't talk right now." The clock on the pavilion deposit started. Noon Friday, it was Wednesday. That evening, after I closed the blinds and fed my old tabby, I walked next door to where Mark Danner lives. Mark is 58, a former paramedic who now captains a small harbor tour boat. He's tall, gentle, and his hands always smell faintly of rope. We've been friendly for years. Coffee on the porch, help with my leaky faucet, Sunday walks across the footbridge. But we never labeled it because past a certain age, labels feel like sheets that don't quite fit a bed. I told him everything. He made 2 mugs of cocoa like it was January instead of May, and listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Do you want to do something about it that isn't about them? What would that be? Marry me?" I laughed because that isn't what you expect after a day like that. He set down his mug, and his face didn't change. "I'm serious. We've been steady for 2 years. We don't need a hall. We can go to the courthouse. We'll tell who we want, when we want. Make your own tide, Laura." I looked at his boat key on the table, a little brass anchor glinting in my lamp. The idea rose in me like a warm current. I said yes. Then I said, "But I want to keep it ours until the right moment, not out of spite, out of strategy." Until then, I needed coverage for the pavilion problem. I wrote a short letter to the Carolina Dunes Board, signed it with a real pen, and hand-delivered it the next morning. I also stopped by Wrightsville Beach Parks and Recreation to confirm that their public beach permit for weddings didn't involve me at all. It didn't. Good. Let love go forward. Let the paperwork be honest. At the courthouse on 3rd Street, we asked for a marriage license. The clerk was calm and precise, unfazed by mid-morning romance. $40, she said. We paid cash. A judge in a black robe met us in a small chamber that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. I wore a linen dress I'd kept from my 40s, and Mark wore a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled. We said simple vows I could remember without reading, and we smiled at each other like teenagers who had finally figured out where to stand. Afterward, Mark's coworker filmed us with a borrowed camera at the public gazebo above the sound. No music, no drone shots, just clean audio and the hush of water under pilings. I faced the lens and spoke like I speak to my piano students when their fingers knot. Steady, patient, clear. "I wasn't invited to a wedding this weekend," I said, "but I didn't want to crash someone else's party. I wanted to build my own home." We finished with a slow walk down the dock. Mark lifted my hand. The camera caught a gull flaring white behind us like a thrown veil. The whole shoot took 12 minutes. But then, the pavilion deadline landed like a gavel. At 10:18 a.m. on Friday, I received a group email from Trish to me, Caleb, and Serena. "We have not received the additional deposit or certificate of insurance. Per contract, your event is at risk of cancellation at noon. Please respond." I didn't reply. The next 40 minutes felt like a long note held too high. At 10:59, a new email arrived. Funds received. Insurance attached. Event confirmed. Serena managed it. Good. The wedding would go on. No one could say I ruined it. But the story I wanted to tell was about consent and dignity. I scheduled my video for Sunday at 6 p.m. Reception time, phones out, cousins scrolling. I titled it, "I wasn't invited to my son's beach wedding, so I chose my own tide." I didn't name him. I didn't show paperwork. I simply told the truth in my voice, then showed a gentle ceremony and a smile that was mine. Saturday passed with yard work and laundry. Sunday, I baked an apple cake because the house feels calmer when it smells like cinnamon. At 3, Caleb left a message, "We're lining up soon, just wish things were different." He hung up before I could decide what to say. By 6, the party had drifted from vows to drinks beneath string lights at Carolina Dunes. My phone sat on the counter, face down. I poured tea and looked at the clock like a pilot timing a landing. At 6:01, my video premiered. At 6:07, my phone buzzed on the counter like a hive. Comments, shares, text pings. I let it hum. At 6:23, there was a knock at my door. It was Naomi, my neighbor across the street and a high school counselor who sees everything. She held her phone to her chest and laughed in that way you do when you know chaos is unavoidable but somehow funny. "Laura," she said, "half their wedding party follows you on Facebook. Your video is everywhere." "I didn't tag anyone," I said. "You didn't have to. Your words did the tagging." By 7:15, my view count was over 50,000. Not because I bought anything or hashtagged anything deep, because people understand a clean boundary. The comments were kind, classy, healthy. This is how you honor yourself without destroying someone else's day. Some were less kind toward my son. but I deleted the cruel ones because my revenge wasn't a mob, it was a mirror. Except the mirror swung back. At 9:02 p.m., I received a text from an unknown number that turned out to be Serena's aunt, Linda. "How dare you humiliate our family," it read. At 10:11, a different ping, a notice from a rental company demanding a balance due for a sponsored ice sculpture I had allegedly approved. Attached was an invoice with my name typed under a signature line again. My email chimed with another invoice from a DJ service, same trick. My fake sponsorship had become a shadow I couldn't just outwalk. On Monday morning I returned to the stack in my folder and added each invoice. Then I called the new Hanover County Magistrate's office and asked about small claims. "You can file online," the clerk said. "Keep it under $10,000. Bring your documents." I did. I named Serena as the primary respondent, and because he'd lived with her and benefited, I listed Caleb as co-respondent, making clear that I sought to recover only unauthorized charges and costs linked to the forged sponsor documents. I paid the $85 filing fee and scheduled a hearing for June 21st. I also emailed both vendors, attaching the police incident number, and wrote, "Any further attempt to collect from me after notice may constitute harassment," and asked them to confirm in writing that they had updated their records. The DJ replied within an hour, "We're withdrawing the invoice. We were misled. The ice company was slower," but by Wednesday they wrote, "We've adjusted the account and will seek payment from the client directly." Then Serena went on a quiet PR campaign. She posted a filtered selfie with a caption about toxic parents and protecting your peace. Her friends shared it. I didn't answer online, because adults with real evidence don't argue in comment sections. I brewed coffee, folded the laundry, and at 2 that afternoon, I called Caleb. "Did you forge my name?" I asked when he picked up. He breathed out. "Serena handled arrangements. Did you know she used my card and typed my name into forms?" "I didn't know about the card. Caleb, I love you. I'm not going to scorch your marriage. I'm going to stand in front of my name." He said nothing for 10 seconds. Then, "Are you going to court?" "Yes, June 21st, 10 a.m. I'll be there." Until that moment, I wasn't sure whether I still had a son. The days to the hearing moved like slow surf. I taught students and paid bills. My video crossed 1 million views. A morning show producer emailed me an invitation to talk about healthy boundaries later in life, and I declined because my life wasn't a segment. It was a neighborhood that still saw me at Food Lion. Mark installed a new porch light and brought me sweet tea from a shop that cuts the ice like snow. The night before the hearing, I laid out my papers: the forged sponsor form in color print, a sample of my actual signature from a check, the bank's freeze letter, the invoices rescinded after my notice, the police report, and a timeline typed in 12-point font with dates and times clear enough that a stranger could follow. I put a yellow sticky at the top: "Keep it short, ask for what you can prove." Court was a low room with gray carpet and a flag that made the air feel formal. The magistrate wore no wig, no drama, just reading glasses on a thin chain. She called our names. Serena arrived in a pale dress with a jacket too hot for June. Caleb sat 2 chairs away from her. His tie hung slightly crooked the way it did when he was 15 and getting ready for his first recital. I spoke first. I described the card charge, the sponsor policy, the fake signature. I passed the judge my exhibits in the order listed on my table of contents. The magistrate read faster than I expected, nodding sometimes. I didn't embellish. I didn't tear up. When I finished, I said, "I'm seeking reimbursement of the attempted $4,000 deposit, rescission of any contracts that falsely name me as sponsor, a written note to vendors clarifying I'm not responsible, and $835 in costs for filing, notarizing, and certified mail." The magistrate asked if I was asking for damages beyond reimbursement. "No, ma'am," I said, "just accuracy and my name back." Serena's turn. She spoke about stress and about a mother who, in her words, makes everything about her. She said she believed the sponsor form was a harmless technicality and that she thought Laura would be proud to help. The magistrate held up the form and asked, "Did Laura sign this?" Serena stared at the carpet. "I typed her name because the venue needed a sponsor and we were out of time." "Did you use her card?" "It was saved on a planning account from something else," Serena said, voice so small it almost slid off the bench. "I thought it would be easier to fix later." Caleb spoke without being asked. I should have stopped it. I didn't. I'm sorry, Mom. Silence in rooms like that feels like a soft bell. The magistrate wrote for a minute, then looked up. Here's my decision, she said. The court orders reimbursement to Ms. Myers of $4,000 related to the unauthorized sponsor deposit attempt, plus $835 in costs. The court also orders that any vendor contracts that list Ms. Myers as sponsor or payer be corrected in writing within 10 days, with copies sent to Ms. Myers. Additionally, the court directs that no further use of Ms. Myers' name occur without her written consent. Judgment entered. She slid papers toward the clerk. You'll receive it in writing by Friday. It wasn't a movie ending. No gasp, no gavel crack. Just the gentle weight of a printed finding that said I wasn't crazy, I wasn't cruel, and I wasn't a doormat. But then, outside on the sidewalk, Serena's mom, whom I barely knew, approached with a stiff smile. You didn't have to make it public, she said. I didn't make anything public, I answered. I made a promise to myself, on video. That's different from airing anyone's laundry. She stared like she couldn't locate the difference. That wasn't my problem to solve. Caleb caught up as I reached my car. I watched your video the next morning, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. I cried. Not because you hurt us. Because I realized why you said you understood. I needed time to decide what my understanding would include, I said. Can we meet for coffee? Just us. We can. Sunday 10. At home that evening I wrapped the judgment in a plastic sleeve and slid it into a binder labeled Life. I sent copies to the vendors with a short neutral cover note, for your records. I emailed Trish at the pavilion and thanked her for responding quickly when I notified them. I'm not above courtesy. Around the midpoint of any storm there's a surge no one predicts. Mine arrived 2 weeks later in the form of a job offer. Not for me, for Serena. A local wedding planner, impressed by her scramble to save the pavilion date, offered her freelance coordination work. She posted about it with a caption about turning pain into purpose. I sat on my porch with iced tea and smiled. She'd learned something. So had I. Then came the aftershocks. A cousin messaged me an apology for the gossip. My sister sent a gift card with a note that said, "Should have checked in sooner." Naomi hosted a small potluck on a Thursday, and Mark grilled shrimp while the sun bent lower than the eaves. He touched my ring, a simple silver band, and said, "How's Mrs. Danner moving through her week?" I laughed at the sound of it, not because I needed a new name to become new, but because claiming it felt like hanging a picture straight. At Sunday coffee, Caleb arrived with a legal pad. He had written down numbers he owed me, lines and dates and amounts he wanted to repay over the next year. You don't have to do this, I said. I know, he said. But I want to write new math. We talked about boundaries. He agreed that if Serena had concerns she would speak to me through him until we found a kinder rhythm. I agreed to give their marriage the privacy it needs to grow. We set a monthly lunch on my calendar, the second Wednesday at noon, no phones on the table. We hugged in the parking lot. He whispered, "I'm proud of you," like a man who finally measured the distance from boyhood to now. My video settled into the slow dignity of the internet's second week. It crossed 2 million views, and then just became a thing that existed, like a shell on a shelf. A nonprofit that supports older women starting over asked if they could use a clip in a training about boundaries. I said yes. A reporter emailed again, and again I said no. Not every story needs a studio light. A month later I walked past Carolina Dunes Pavilion at dusk. A new wedding was in full swirl. Laughter braided with the clink of glasses. For a second, I saw a boy in a rented tux 14 years earlier, cheeks still round, bow tie crooked, telling me he would never speak to me like some friends spoke to their mothers. I believed him then. I believe him again now, with adult caveats. Love is not a contract, it's a document you amend with care. When the written judgment arrived in the mail, it was crisp and plain. I filed it, then went to the bank to confirm the reimbursement had posted. It had. I transferred $500 to a savings account I labeled Porch Trips because names matter, even for money. And I wanted to remember that some of my revenge, if you can call it that, looked like a ferry ride to Southport and a fried shrimp basket with Mark. We did take that ferry on a Saturday in July. Mark wore a navy ball cap and leaned on the rail as the water cut into diamonds. You timed your tide, he said. You didn't drown anyone. I didn't want to, I said. Still, he said, you rode a current. That night, back home, I opened the binder where my judgment slept beside our marriage license. For a second I touched both papers at once, one under each hand. Left hand, the state verifying that my name belongs to me. Right hand, the state verifying that my name belongs with his. It felt like balancing two halves of a scale that finally matched. People ask me if I regret releasing the video during their reception. I don't. Not because it ruined anything, it didn't, but because it was the only time the tide lined up with what I needed to say. If I'd posted later, it would have looked like sour grapes, and if I'd posted earlier, it might have spooked vendors past common sense. Timing matters, so does tone. I wrote mine carefully and let the water carry it. Caleb and I are not a movie ending either. We're a calendar with recurring appointments and a willingness to press reschedule instead of cancel when work or weather intrudes. I send him recipes. He sends me photos of the dog they adopted from the shelter, a blocky mutt named Oyster. Serena and I exchange neutral texts about holidays. Neutral is fine. Neutral is peaceful. I still play piano at weddings sometimes. The first gig after the storm was at a church on Market Street with stained glass that made everyone look briefly holy. The bride's mother cried into a wad of tissues like a child, and the groom's father snapped pictures on a tablet too big for his hands. I played Pachelbel because someone always asks for it, then snuck in a Debussy prelude during seating because life appreciates a little complexity. When the couple walked back up the aisle, the bride glanced at me and mouthed, "Thank you." I smiled and kept my tempo steady. That is my whole revenge, a steady tempo. I didn't shout on the phone when my son said not to come. I didn't stomp down the pavilion steps with security. I didn't torch a family online. I set a clock, kept receipts, and told the truth on camera at the exact minute I knew it would reach who it needed to reach. The court ordered what it could order, the vendors corrected what they could correct, and my life slipped back into a channel I recognized. Every so often, when the sky turns the exact gray of Mark's hair and the water looks like forged metal, I think of my voice in that video, low, measured, not a tremor in it. I remember how it felt to press publish and turn my phone face down like a player laying a card. I remember the tide threading beneath the pier posts, unstoppable, ordinary, right on time. I was told not to come because I would make things awkward. I said I understood, and I did. I understood that the quietest revenge is claiming your own name at the exact hour people try to write it for you, then walking your chosen tide without looking back.